Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of the Kola Superdeep Borehole, what we found when we drilled to hell. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction, not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In 1970, Soviet scientists began drilling a hole in the Kola Peninsula of northwestern Russia. They planned to drill to 14 kilometers, deeper than any hole ever bored in human history. The project took 24 years. They reached 12 kilometers and 260 meters before the rock became too hot for their equipment to function. What they found on the way down defied almost every geological model in existence. Water appeared where water was physically impossible. Fossils of microscopic organisms turned up 6 kilometers underground. The basalt layer that every seismologist had confidently predicted they would encounter at 7 kilometers simply was not there. The drill site became one of the most scientifically productive geological experiments ever conducted, overturning assumptions about the deep earth that had stood for decades. It also generated, in 1989, what is probably the most persistent hoax in internet history: the claim that scientists lowered a microphone into the hole and heard the screams of the damned. They did not. What they actually found was stranger than that. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the landscape of modern documented mysteries, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Human perception is fallible. This is not an insult, it is neuroscience. The brain does not passively record reality, it actively constructs it, filling gaps with expectation, inferring causes from insufficient data, and storing memories that are reshaped by subsequent experience. Eyewitness testimony is the weakest form of courtroom evidence precisely because what people see and what actually happened frequently diverge. Sound can cause visual hallucinations. Infrasound at specific frequencies can produce feelings of dread, the sensation of a presence, and even visual disturbances. Sleep deprivation, stress, and hypoxia can generate vivid experiences indistinguishable from waking reality. All of this is relevant when evaluating modern mysteries. Many apparently anomalous experiences have prosaic explanations rooted in human neurology, temporal lobe activity, hypnagogic hallucinations, shared social expectation shaping perception. A willingness to consider these explanations is not dismissiveness, it is intellectual hygiene. The brain is capable of generating extraordinarily convincing experiences that have no external cause, and yet, the perceptual explanation has its limits. It cannot account for physical evidence, radiation burns, landing traces, electromagnetic interference on electronic equipment, or anomalous readings on calibrated instruments. When multiple independent witnesses, separated by distance, report identical details, mass hallucination strains credulity. When physical measurements corroborate subjective experience, the neurological explanation is insufficient. These are the cases that demand another look. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades. And patterns, in science, demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, what we found when we drilled to hell, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Kola Superdeep Borehole, designation SG3, is located on the Kola Peninsula in northwestern Russia, approximately 10 kilometers from the town of Zapolyarny. Drilling began on May 24, 1970, as part of a Soviet scientific program to study the deep structure of continental crust. The borehole is only 23 centimeters in diameter at its maximum depth, but it descends 262 meters, 26 kilometers, making it the deepest artificial point ever created on Earth. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen, instruments malfunction, researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered, for scale, the Mariana Trench, the deepest point in the ocean, descends 11,034 meters below sea level. The Kola borehole descends 12,262 meters below the surface, deeper than the ocean's deepest point, measured straight down through solid rock. The drilling was conducted in stages, with multiple branch holes, and was halted in 1992 when rock temperatures reached 180 degrees Celsius, far higher than the predicted 100 degrees at that depth, making further drilling technically impossible. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. The temperature anomaly was the first major surprise. Geological models of the time predicted a thermal gradient of approximately 1.5 degrees Celsius per 100 meters of depth. The Kola borehole found gradients of 3 degrees per 100 meters, double the prediction. By 12 kilometers, the rock was hot enough that the drill equipment softened and became unmanageable. The project was formally closed in 1995. The facility has since been abandoned. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation, but the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, the second major surprise was water. At depths between 6 and 12 kilometers, the borehole encountered water-saturated rock. Conventional geology predicted that rock at such depths, under enormous pressure, would be effectively impermeable. No water should exist there. The water found was not surface water that had seeped down. Isotopic analysis showed it was produced in situ by chemical reactions between minerals and hydrogen atoms in the rock. Water created by geology, not deposited from above. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of, at depths of 6 to 7 kilometers, the Kola borehole cores contained microscopic fossils of 24 ancient species of single-celled organisms, preserved in rock, dated to approximately 2 billion years old. The existence of biological material at these depths was entirely unexpected. The fossils were encased in organic compounds that had survived geological processes for 2 billion years, raising questions about the depth to which life penetrates the Earth's crust. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The predicted basalt layer at 7 kilometers depth long assumed by geologists to be responsible for a seismic wave discontinuity. The Conrad discontinuity, observed in earthquake data, was not found. The Kola cores showed the seismic signal at that depth was produced not by a transition from granite to basalt, but by metamorphic changes in the granite itself under increasing pressure and temperature. This required a significant revision of models of continental crust structure. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Kola Superdeep Borehole, what we found when we drilled to hell. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that the water found at extreme depth in the Kola borehole is not surface water, but is produced by the chemical reaction of minerals with hydrogen under pressure, primordial water or metamorphic water that has never been at the surface. This mechanism, now well supported by mineralogical analysis, implies that water exists throughout the deep crust in quantities far larger than previously estimated, with implications for understanding the global water cycle and the potential for deep microbial life. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence, but it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that the absence of the predicted basalt layer showed that the Conrad discontinuity, a seismic boundary observed in continental crust worldwide, is produced by metamorphic transitions in existing rock types rather than compositional changes between different rock types. This revised the standard model of continental crust structure and demonstrated that seismic interpretation alone cannot determine rock type without direct sampling, a fundamental methodological lesson for geophysics. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that the Sounds of Hell story, that Soviet scientists lowered a microphone into the borehole and recorded screaming from 14 kilometers depth, is a complete fabrication. It originated in a 1989 Finnish Christian magazine article and was republished globally as fact. The borehole never reached 14 kilometers, no microphone was lowered, no sounds were recorded. The story spread because it mapped onto pre-existing anxieties about Soviet science and religious end-times narratives. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, what we found when we drilled to hell, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes core samples from the Kola borehole are physically preserved and have been analyzed repeatedly since their extraction. The water-bearing minerals and the isotopic signature of the deep water have been confirmed by multiple independent studies. The fossils at 6-7 kilometers depth, 24 species of ancient single-celled organisms in rock dated to approximately 2 billion years, are documented in Soviet and post-Soviet geological publications and have been independently verified. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented. The temperature gradient anomaly is documented in the borehole's continuous temperature logs, 3 degrees Celsius per 100 meters rather than the predicted 1.5 degrees. This finding has been reproduced in analysis of the raw data and explains why drilling stopped at 26 kilometers rather than the planned 14 kilometers. The thermal gradient data has been published and is used in geophysical models of the Kola Peninsula. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed. The revision of the Conrad discontinuity interpretation was published in multiple Soviet geological journals from the 1970s through the 1990s and has been cited in international geophysics literature. The finding that the seismic boundary at 7 kilometers depth reflects metamorphic granite rather than basalt changed standard models of continental crust composition and has influenced subsequent deep drilling programs worldwide. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Kola Superdeep Borehole, what we found when we drilled to hell. Now we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. The Kola borehole facility is now abandoned and the shaft sealed. The site is a recognized scientific landmark, but receives no official protection. The project motivated subsequent deep drilling initiatives. The German Continental Deep Drilling Program, KTB, reached 9.1 kilometers in 1994, and the International Ocean Discovery Program continues to drill into oceanic crust. A Chinese deep drilling project is currently targeting 10 kilometers. The Sounds of Hell hoax remains one of the most persistent false stories on the internet, recycled in new formats every few years. What the Kola borehole actually found, water where water was impassable, life where life could not survive, and no basalt where basalt was certain, was more genuinely unsettling than any demonic audio recording. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Kola Superdeep Borehole. What we found when we drilled to hell, from the historical record, through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Kola Superdeep Borehole ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.